we are talking about the M by Michael Mondavi wine, which is our 2018 vintage. And we created this wine as the culmination of my father Michael's life's work. So so this guy has been involved with the wine industry since the early 60s, when Napa Valley wine was just actually being recognized as some of the best wines in the world. And with a career like that, spanning from the 60s until, of course, today, we really wanted to make a scant few very special cases of M by Michael Mondavi for my father. So really there is only 16 to 17 barrels made every year of this. Sabrina Masala, who is our winemaker, and I'm the winemaker with Sabrina. I love this. I mentioned her name and there she manifests on the screen. She is an amazing talent. So she and I together craft and blend these wines. And the 2018 is probably one of my favorites, really. And we have to digress to understand why it's one of the favorites. I took over the winemaking really in 2014. That's when Sabrina joined us as well. And then we worked together on the 14, 15, and 16. So we had a good rhythm going. And we were ready to make the epic vintage of 2017. And the fires took place. And so we did not get to make a 17 vintage. And so the vineyard rebounded beautifully. And we were able to craft the 2018 M by Michael Mondavi. And two things happened. We had just decided that the ethos of this wine, it didn't need to be the best Cabernet, which is great, but it needed to be the best wine, period. And by the best wine, we decided that we didn't want to be shackled by just having to have 75% Cabernet Sauvignon. So what we did, what Sabrina just joined, what Sabrina and I did was we decided to pitch to the family that M by Michael Mondavi should absolutely be the best wine possible, not the best Cabernet. We wanted to be unleashed, unshackled, let the beast out of the cage and make the best damn wine in the world. And so Sabrina and I started looking at the wines of the world that we love the most. And we found that the wines that we love the most, and the most importantly that Michael loved the most, had a good bit of Cabernet Franc and also a little bit of Merlot. And so Sabrina and I sculpted and reblended and presented this blend to the family, and they absolutely loved it. Wow. And philosophically, that is when we had the tack change of what is more important, making the best varietal or making the best darn wine. And we really had to look to the first growths into Bordeaux, because do they make single varietal wines or do they make the best possible wine? Is Mouton just Cabernet Sauvignon? Is Cheval Blanc just one varietal? No, they're not. And so we really decided that making the best wine was the right and correct way to respect a wine that is just from my father for 16 to 18 barrels a year of highly selected, handcrafted wines. And that is why we've created the M by Michael Mondavi. And the 2018 marks our new package, right? So this is our previous package, which is a really cool abstract. I love it. It's representative, that's easy for me to say, of the earth and the soil and the roots. But it didn't pop as much, even though it was beautiful. And so we decided that we wanted to evolve the label to represent the evolution in the winemaking and the winemaking style that Sabrina and I created together for Michael. And so we created this absolutely stunning package on this beautiful, just buttery paper with this great statement of the vines with the roots are making the soil. They surround the ethos of M by Michael Mondavi, because my father has always said is that great wines come from a place. And so Atlas Peak, the hillsides, is absolutely beautiful. Napa Valley is perfect for growing these great wines. And so we really created something special that when Michael tasted it, he was blown away and so happy that we decided to push him and the family to say, hey, you know what? We need to make the best damn wine possible, not just the best single varietal. And so M by Michael Mondavi has been reborn as one of the best wines that I've ever had the pleasure of working on, as well as Sabrina. And my father says that it's the most favorite wine that he's ever had in his career. And that's saying something. So long answer to a short question, but tell me a few things that we should dive into a little bit deeper on the answer to that.
Absolutely. Well, great start. And congratulations to you and Sabrina for stepping out of the box and just re-envisioning, what the best of this wine could be. And it's exceptional. I've had the opportunity to try it, and we'll try it here together in just a moment. But I want to dive into a bit of the details. So let's start about sense of place. So if you could just speak about the vineyard, plots, is this a single vineyard? Give us some of the details of this site.
Correct. So we predominantly source the fruit from a vineyard that we have up in Atlas Peak, and it's a high altitude Cabernet Sauvignon, great texture, body, teeny berries. So a lot of intensity of tannin and structure to the wine. But then we really understood that we needed to balance that out with Cabernet Franc. The aromatics of Cabernet Franc are just absolutely extraordinary. So we blended the aromat of Cabernet Franc in to give it that aromatic lift and that complexity. And of course, Merlot. Many of the classic first gross and beautifully well-balanced wines of the world utilize Merlot for that mid-body and that plushness. Cabernet Sauvignon has great beginning, great sides, great finish. But a lot of times Cabernet Sauvignon really lacks that middle part of the donut, if you will. Merlot really brings that body in and fleshes that out. And so our theory with the blending was to make a complete wine. And it sounds redundant, it sounds silly, but to make a wine with a beginning that's true, a middle that coats your mouth, that has a great full palate and texture, and then a long finish. So it sounds silly, but a beginning, middle, and an end are truly important to winemaking. There's a lot of wines that are flashy up front that don't have a great finish in the world, and those are fun, right? They're great. However, I think if you want an internationally acclaimed wine that will be worthy of the world's best events and the finest sellers, it has to have that beginning, middle, and end, much like a symphony has every part of it. And so we've really worked hard to create that blend. And of course, a little Petit Verdot, just to add a little structure and that little beautiful flowery aromatic to the wine. So it's been really neat to work with each of these varietals. And I know Sabrina is on here today, so she can type in a few comments. I'm surprised she hasn't sent about 10 things already. So we'll hit her up to type in a few comments as well.
Nice. If you could give us a few words about the treatment, the winemaking, oak aging, what's your philosophy and focus here?
Well, it's interesting. I think that I was guilty of over oaking wines for a good bit of time, just like I think a lot of the Napa Valley winemakers are guilty of that even still today. So one of the first things that Sabrina had asked me when she came to work with us was, why such a high percentage of new oak? I'm like, well, new oak is flashy, it's sexy, it's vanilla, it's butterscotch, it feels good, the texture's great, the aromas, they pop. Like, why wouldn't you want that, right? I mean, are you crazy? Are we having this conversation? And we tasted some wines together, and she showed and demonstrated some lower oak threshold wines. And lower oak doesn't mean like 10, 20%, it means like 60, 70. And so when we were looking at that, she said to me, don't you see more of the vineyard? Don't you see more of the terroir? I said, yes. I said, but where's that flash? Where's that vanilla, that butterscotch? And she says, that's like perfume on a woman, or a cologne on a man, right? It adds a little bit, but really we're missing the soul of the vine, the soul of the wine, which is the terroir. And that perfume, if you will, that new barrel component needs to be a part of it and not what's overwhelming. And so Sabrina really challenged the former methodology of the winemaking, coming in very new, and you had to listen because she was great. She had spot on palate. And so together we worked, we evolved the barrel regime and created that style together that I think is more representative of an internationally acclaimed wine that can sit in the table of London, Bordeaux, Paris, or of course here in Napa Valley in New York City. And so I think that the evolution was positive. Together in the fermentations, we decided we wanted to have shorter skin contact time, mountain fruit, right? It has a lot of texture. And because the berries are smaller, there's Dad up there, because the berries are smaller, use the analogy, the smaller the berry, it's like having more tea leaves when you're steeping tea. And so we were getting a lot of extraction out. So we got enough. We got it early. And so what we did is we shortened that skin contact time so that we had a better balanced wine that we were putting into the bottle before we had a long skin contact. And I felt that the wines were getting a bit tactile. Because if you leave tea leaves in the tea too long, in the water too long, it gets a little tannic. Yeah. Same thing with grapes and skins. So to answer your question, we used a little bit less oak for the new style of M. We used a little bit less skin contact time to really make certain that we brought in the terroir. And I think that we really nailed it and created something absolutely beautiful together.
Yeah, absolutely stunning. And we did get I'll bring her picture back up so it's like she's with us, but we did get a comment from Sabrina. So working in the Animo Beautiful Vineyard, the philosophy is to make our wines as natural as possible and show people a sense of place in the glass. Minimal intervention, pure fruit character, and terroir.
Yeah. So my guess is that if Sabrina just had her way, she'd probably be at about 50% new oak. I still really like oak, and so depending on the vintage, we're at anywhere from 60 to 75% new oak in it. And I think that's beautiful. I think we have a great harmony now. I mean, there's no doubt about it. A sense of place is essential in world-class luxury tier wines. But the sex appeal of a little bit of new French oak, there's nothing quite like it. So that's okay as well.
Well, no, I think it's you strike a perfect balance between the two, and I'll bring myself back into the frame here because I want to get my hands on a glass of this and taste it with you in person here. So again, I have a bottle of the new 2018 M, which is beautiful gold leaf. It has just a beautiful texture and feel to it. It's really a luxury bottle.
That paper, feel that paper. So that's an Italian paper that Joanna on our team found. I mean, it just feels like butter. I mean, I love the paper.
It almost feels like leather. It's very impressive. So I have a glass here in front of me, but I want to go through it and just do a quick little tasting. I mean, on the nose, it's just exquisite and expressive. Mm-hmm. Dark fruits, spices, plums, cherries. Give me just a few of your notes on this wine, if you don't mind, while I run through it.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you on the dark fruits, and it sounds almost cliche, but by dark fruits, I mean those beautiful French plums that when you score the outside of the skin, they're just bloody red, and then they kind of transfer into that beautiful yellow on the inside, a classic French plum. And so I think there's always a little bit of blackberry in Napa Valley wines, which is really beautiful that we have the ability to ripen like that. But that French plum is really where I like to focus because it's a different layering of texture when you have that type of plum that's sweet, but it also has acidity that kind of makes your mouth water just a little bit. And then when you weave in those classic characteristics of Napa Valley Cabernet and Merlot that have a little bit of that blackberry, or really specifically loganberries, if you're a berry geek like I am, then you'll really start to see why it's more of a medley of dark fruits. The texture of the wine, because it's Atlas Peak, I think that there is always this slight undertone of like a broken quartz, because we have the volcanic and very stony soil. And so I think there's always that fine layer of like dust and quartz. And if you've ever gotten geeky and gone camping, or when you were a Boy Scout or Girl Scout, did the flint and steel, there's that little bit of that fine taste of that broken quartz, I think, in this. And I really love that. It's a real signature, I think, of Atlas Peak. And then really moving in, excuse me, on the aromatics, I can't help but love the Cabernet Franc that comes through. Of course, you smell all the berries that we talked about as a precursor. You smell some of the French oak and a little teeny bit of that creme brulee. But really, when you get into that Cabernet Franc, it's almost like just like some beautiful dried herbs and some leaves and some beautifully damp soil. I really find that to be a lot of the Cabernet Franc. The earthiness comes from. Merlot is the high notes of the strawberry that's in this wine. It's almost like a strawberry compote. So if you smell it, you'll notice that there's just a little hint of that. That is really from the Merlot. And you asked if it was a single vineyard wine before. It's not. I have a great friend who let me source Merlot from a Howe Mountain vineyard. And so we're not a single vineyard wine because we use a little bit of Merlot from Howe Mountain. And I think that's just spectacular when you can have a qualitative fruit sourcing like that. And the completeness of the wine, I think, manifests in the fact that it greets you with a full palate, but it doesn't overwhelm you. It definitely has mid-body, and that's where I think the chocolate notes pick up just a little bit. And then that finish really is so long with the quartz and a little bit of the oak that kind of comes through. It really is, I think, a properly complete wine.
Exactly. The finish is, I could still taste it minutes later. But the really shocking thing is you're expecting this big blockbuster wine, but you put it on the palate, it's velvety, it's smooth, it's texture, you have all this complexity of fruits. And then after a while, it does grip up and you get that tannin in the end, but it's nice and warm and inviting. It's not aggressive.
Yeah, I think that's something. So Sabrina's background, since we've talked about her a few times, is from Argentina. And then she, of course, spent some time working in Chile. And what's interesting about Argentina is they have a little bit lower pH in their wines than we do here in the United States. And so I think some of the influence that she brought to the table was, how do we bring forth the beauty of the fruit that we have? How do we, instead of just having a giant high pH, mouthful of wine, how do we bring in some delicacy to the wine and still respect Napa Valley? Because if you're growing grapes in Napa Valley, you need to have ripeness. That's Napa Valley. It's part of our trade. It's part of our terroir. You need to be able to demonstrate opulence. That's part of Napa Valley. Yet, we can pull back a little bit. If you're an equestrian, you kind of rein back. You kind of slow down and collect the animal, the horse, if you will, if you're talking about a riding analogy, and you really get that balance underfoot. And what we did with the grapes is we pulled everything back just a little bit to balance it so that we could have that wonderful texture, and so it wasn't just blowing up in your face like other wines do, which is great. But this wine, I wanted international appeal. I wanted elegance. I want this to be Christie's, Sotheby's worthy of auction houses later in life.
Well, it absolutely is. And the other surprising thing is, and my mouth's watering a bit, is the acidity. You have definitely, noticeable acidity as, kind of a background there too. So. Yeah.
Well, I see, not to get nerdy, but I love this stuff, right? A lot of big Napa Valley Cabernets will be at 3.8 or over pH. Ours is at 3.75. And so that allows, instead of it just being very coating, just that little bit, that scopes, that gnat's ass, if you will, coming back just a little bit on the pH and allowing the natural grape acidity allows for the other fruit flavors to really be felt and tasted as well. So sometimes less can be more.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. It's just really, it just has that complexity and layers. How long do you think in your head? What sort of a evolution and sort of a lifetime would this wine have? The 2018.
Look, I mean, I love the analogy that right now in today's day and age, with the better grape growing that we have, with the better technology that we have to understand where we are in the fermentation with tannins, anthocyanins, the polyphenols, we can really measure all that stuff in real time. And with our experience, our sensory, we need to be able to craft wines that when they're released, you can grip it and rip it, pour a glass, and feel great about that. They have to be accessible upon release. Now, there's nothing wrong with having a big wine, and you need to decant that on release, but it has to be accessible. It has to be drinkable upon release. And a wine of this ilk and other Napa Valley classics, whether you're talking Harlan's or Colgan's or what have you, they have to be age-worthy. If you can't put these down in the cellar and have them last 20, 30 years, you probably you need to disclose that, right? This wine is a grip it and rip it now within 2 years. Don't worry about it for the future. But no, this is a classic wine. We can open this now, or we can let this age for 30, 40 years. The biggest challenge with aging wines is not the actual wine falling apart. It's the degradation of the cork. We've recorked a lot of our older wines in our cellar because the wines are great and they're worthy of continual aging. These are wines from the 70s and 80s and 90s that my father made and then I've made as well. And it's the cork that's the enemy of the aging. Our wine, the M by Michael Mondavi 2018, is gorgeous right now, and I would feel comfortable laying this down for your kid's 21st birthday, wedding, bar mitzvah, whatever it is, because it's going to have the texture and the balance to do so. And people a lot of times will say with respect to aging, oh, this wine's so big right now, it's so tannic, we need to age this. Yeah, it'll help. My theory is that wines that are in balance now, even though they're big and opulent, those are the wines that you want to age. If you find a wine that's disjointed and just overly tannic, guess what? When you age that 10, 20 years, it's still going to be a big tannic wine. It's just going to be a little softer. You want to find wines that are in balance and age those, because those will be the ones that mature the best in the bottle.
Exactly. Well, you succeeded in that. When I first had my first sip today, you have that really approachable characteristic, which I wasn't expecting. You're expecting something more grippy and tight, but it was open, plush. I just poured this glass maybe 20 minutes ago, so it hasn't been, I didn't even decant it, and it's just very, very approachable, but it still has that structure that you could tell it has a long life ahead of it. So,
you know, it's funny. I get asked a lot about decanting, and I always say I love to decant, and the but is know the wine first, right? Because you don't want to introduce all this ambient air and oxygen to the wine and really have it fall apart. So I like to know the wine. And if you open a bottle of wine and an hour later, it's exponentially better than it was when you opened it. Okay, great. So you know that wine can be decanted. The other, I think, faux pas that a lot of people make is decanting older wines. The only reason I decant an older wine, like over 20 years old or even 10 years old, is to make sure there's no sediment when I pour it out for my guests. So if I decant an older wine for guests at dinner, I will decant that efficiently, gently, quickly at the table. And I usually put some gas in the bottle. I don't want it to age out. I don't want it to get a lot. And then I'll pour it quickly for everybody and say, let's taste it and see how it evolves. If you decant an older wine, let it sit for an hour before you serve it to your guests. If it's 20, 30 years old, the bloom's off the rose, people. You let it open up too long. So you decant older wines for sediment and mitigating that. Younger wines you decant to open up. So that's my rule of thumb.
Exactly. Well, I think that's really well put. And I'll go back to the pictures of your beautiful bottles here.
Oh yeah.
I think we'll have to wrap it up here. But I think we've covered just about everything. I think you did an excellent job there. It's all those years of practice definitely worked. So, I wanted to put this up here. Not that ratings are everything, but you already have some incredible press for the 18. 95 points right out of the gates. So it's already being well received in the press, but I could just tell you from my experience, it's going to be a blockbuster.
I don't know what points taste like, but I got to tell you what, I don't mind having them. So that's always nice. But I think the M by Michael Mondavi is really, truly an exceptional wine, a beautiful balance. I think that weaving in the Cabernet Sauvignon, the Cabernet Franc, the Merlot really has made for truly a world-class wine of epic opulence and balance. There's wonderful acidity and, of course, nice supple tannin texture. I think this is, to date, the best wine that we've ever made. Having Sabrina Masala, as a winemaker on this with me, and having my father taste and sculpt with us as well, it's really the dream team of winemaking. It just doesn't get any better. And I really hope that anybody who's listening to this today gets a hold of one of these bottles, because, again, we only made 16 barrels of this. It's going to be gone before you even know it. Yeah. All right, everybody. Take care.
Thank you again, Rob. Thank you for everything. Have a great rest of the day. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in today, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.